This podcast has been made possible by Ledge.
Hi, it's Julie Swinney, CFO of Zendesk, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 824.
I take the total ideal customer profile, and then I hit another button. I call it the TAM Now button, right? Who's actually in market to buy a product like ours or has a pain point that our product addresses. And that gives me another list. Then I take both those lists and do what all CFOs do and just apply a dollar amount to each of the companies on that list. And now I have our TAM. And by the way, this goes over great when I'm talking to particularly a potential new investor, or if you think about a potential IPO in our future, a public market investor that maybe can't invest now but wants to be educated prior to a potential IPO. They always ask about your TAM, and I can say, here's my TAM, and by the way, this isn't some wishy-washy number. This is how we develop our product, what it's designed to do.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's episode, we speak with Rob Goldenberg, CFO of 6sense. Of all the career experiences Rob Goldenberg had acquired as an investment banker, his experience with a bankrupt landscape company was perhaps least likely to become a door opener to future career opportunities. Fast forward to 2015, and investment banker Goldenberg nabs an interview spot for a CFO position with software startup 6sense. However, Goldenberg's CFO ambitions appear all but derailed when the 6sense executive informs the investment banker he prefers candidates with technical accounting backgrounds. Which brings us back to the bankrupt landscaping company, a business investment banker Goldenberg had been tasked with selling years earlier. A feat that required Goldenberg to take an extended 3-month deep dive into the company's accounting books. A tour of duty that sharpened Goldenberg's accounting acumen and armed him with enough accounting knowledge to make a strong impression and advance him into the next round of interviews. We'll hear that story and much more on today's episode. We'll begin after this. Does your finance team struggle with routine tasks like reconciliation and manually managing multiple bank accounts? Many tech companies today have complex finance operations and massive amounts of data in different disconnected silos. Whether you're reconciling across 6 different payment processors or between NetSuite and the bank, closing the books can be a nightmare. Ledge has found a better way. Ledge is a finance operations platform that connects all your banking, payment, and accounting systems into one unified platform. Ledge automates revenue reconciliation across all systems, right down to the transaction level, and instantly matches payments, invoices, refunds, chargebacks, or any other transaction. Ledge gives you real-time visibility into your cash position across all accounts and alerts you about issues and at-risk funds in real time, so you can act in real time. And get this, Ledge requires no engineering resources. Ledge plugs right into your existing stack, so you can get set up instantly. Ledge puts finance teams back in control. Learn more at ledge.co. Hello, we're speaking with Robert Goldenberg, CFO of 6sense. Rob, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
Rob, we always begin by asking our guests to look back for us. We're wondering if you can identify for us and share with us some of those experiences you feel prepared you to become a finance leader today. What would those be?
Sure. So to go way back, nearly 25 years ago, I started my career as an investment banker in New York City. And my first year on the job, I was in the office every single day. Very different experience than folks who started their careers recently. So I would say hard work was one of the things, but in my career as a banker, I learned a number of things, and it seems as though there are an increasing number of reformed investment bankers who are now in the CFO slot, whereas at the beginning of my career is normally a path from public accounting into that role. And I think some of the things that are not necessarily unique to me, but similar across folks with a banking background, is you gain, of course, financial and accounting acumen, but there's also attention to detail. There's this idea of performing under pressure. There's communication skills. For me, one of the things I learned my first year was how to sleep standing up, which I did for my first time. That's what happens when you work on pitch books all night. And what's interesting though is you get all these pieces, even the accounting piece, and I needed all of those to be able to just function in my job. But what I will say is, and you didn't ask this in the question, but one of the things I was not necessarily prepared for was the operational side of the business. Right, there was great finance and accounting. Got that nailed. When you move, though, as I did, from what's essentially an advisory role uh, or a consultative role into a CFO position, you're also moving into an operating role.
Just one follow up to your advisory role chapter, your investment banking chapter. I don't know right away if you were sitting at the table with CEOs and CFOs, people involved in deals. Curious when you first got exposed, perhaps, to the senior management at different companies doing business with the investment banks.
Oh,
When did that happen?
I remember it very well, actually. And it was in the context of a meeting where we were essentially pitching our services to a company in the oil and gas space. And right, and you create a pitch book for this. And as the junior member of the team, I was responsible for things like formatting the PowerPoint. Actually, this was so long ago, we were doing the pitch book in Microsoft Word. Uh, in any event, 3 weeks of my life spent creating this pitch book. It was over 100 pages long. Also had to print it and bind it and make sure that none of the pages were out of order. And then as my reward, I got to go to the meeting. And it was me and a half a dozen senior people from the investment bank I was working for, and the CEO, CFO, and the chairman of the board of this prospect. 3 weeks of my work for a 90-minute meeting. And when we got into that meeting, the only thing that the prospect wanted to talk about was what was going on with their competition and what was going on in their value chain. Right? In their value chain, not that this detail is important, part of their value chain was buying very special steel pipes that were imported from South Korea. This had nothing to do with my pitch book. We maybe went to 3 pages of what I had prepared, and no surprise, those 3 pages were all about their competitors' valuation in the public equity markets. And what I learned was, well, there's a lesson I learned later, which is preparation is important. This particular experience did not teach that lesson. The lesson that it taught me, and it was a real eye opener, was folks who operate a business care very, very deeply about their competitive environment and what you would think of, I guess, in a SWOT analysis. And the services that we provide, while important, are transactional. We as investment bankers, right, an M&A deal, IPO, a bond issuance, but they are not fundamentally core to their business.
all total, 15 years in investment banking?
Yes, with a break for business school. But when I was in business school, I did my internship in investment banking. So I counted as an uninterrupted 15 years.
When you went back to business school, what were you hoping to, were you looking to do something different out when you come out the other side? Were you looking to, stay in investment banking, but maybe jump to the next level? What was the reason?
So I would say my decision making calculus on going back to business school was somewhat less mature than how I make decisions today. And to directly answer your question, my goal in going back to business school was to get out of banking. Now, what they don't tell you about business school before you start there is your second week in business school, you need to start interviewing for internships. And given my background, I was I wasn't qualified to work back of the house at a restaurant, but I was highly qualified to get an investment banking internship. And I was fortunate in that I got an internship with a firm that actually spiked or piqued my interest, and eventually decided to go back into banking for another 10 years after that.
Now, I interrupted you earlier as you began to tell us about moving into an operating role. And I want to just point out to the audience that you've been uh, CFO of 6sense now since 2015. So it's been 8 years. And it's interesting because it looks like you went right from investment banking into that CFO office, which you don't always see. Sometimes there's sort of a gateway role that finance leaders play. To me, that means you brought something of a fresh perspective. You didn't grow up within a corporate finance function, really, with any of the pluses or minuses that might have.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I'll give you a little bit of context first. When I interviewed with 6sense, my interview was with their CFO. And at the time, their CFO was actually a fractional CFO. In fact, that's how he opened the interview. He said, Rob, I'm a fractional CFO. I'm the CFO of 8 companies. I see your resume. I've reviewed it. I've heard your recommendations. Great experience in banking. 6sense is a very small company looking to make their first internal finance and accounting hire. Your investment banking background, while great, is not a fit for 6sense. 6sense needs someone who can start at ground zero and someone who has more tactical accounting experience. And I said, well, I thought in my head, this is a very interesting way to start an interview. But what I said was, I understand. Why don't you grill me on accounting for the next 20 minutes? We have 45 minutes scheduled, so I'll give you some time back and we can part ways friends. And he thought that was I think he chuckled a little. He thought that was a good idea, I guess. Right? I'm not a mind reader. And he grilled me for 20 minutes. And at the end of 20 minutes, he said, you're great. I'm going to recommend they hire you. We're going to schedule your next 6 interviews in the next week and a half. And by the way, interviewing with 6 people, one of them was a board member, interviewing with 5 people, that was about 20% of the company at the time, right? It was 25 employees when I was interviewing, 32 employees by the time I started. So in terms of sort of legacy problems, it's not how you ask the question, but I think that might have been what you were hinting at, right? There are a lot of companies fall into a lot of bad habits. Yes, fresh eyes, but it was fresh eyes on a very, very short track record of history, right? What ended up becoming the key piece was implementing from
I love
scratch in many
the when you
cases.
said I'll let you grill me on the accounting because, of course, that would be the assumption that your soft spot will be the accounting, the regular reporting that investment banking world seldom, gets that deep in. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. Would you tell us that along the way, you were pretty good with the accounting, meaning understanding the accounting, perhaps better than some or many of your peers in investment banking, you were perhaps a little more aware.
So it's tough for me to self promote, but I would say in this instance, it's objective fact. I was better than the average investment banker at accounting, and it's not necessarily that I was smarter than any of my peers, but it was directly related to the experiences I had as a banker. I worked on a number of deals. For example, I worked on a deal to sell a landscaping company, very small landscaping company out of bankruptcy. And very small landscaping companies, in my experience, and by the way, my experience is an N of one, very small landscaping companies in bankruptcy do not have a solid internal accounting function. As part of my role on that deal, I had to take over their internal accounting system for about 3 months, which included things like making journal entries, which I'd never done before. But I learned on the job. For if there are any accountants listening to this, it was a form of Peachtree was the accounting system. That's how long ago this was, and it sat on a desktop computer in the back of the CEO's office. There was no cloud ERP here, and that was at my very first job in investment banking. And what's interesting, I think, about when you get exposure to something, in this case, accounting, when you get exposure to something and it's critical for your job that you learn how to do it with some level of competency and you actually manage to do that, I find that the learning compounds over time, even if it's not necessarily directly related to your day to day job. And yes, accounting is not necessarily directly related to the day to day job of an investment banker, but with that initial formative experience, I got sort of a kickstart in accounting, and then that grew over time.
So it sounded like, again, as you shared with us, you went off to grad school thinking, I'd love to put investment banking behind me. It didn't happen right away. So how does it happen? What exactly changes? What pieces come into place for you that allow you to finally say, great, now's the time?
Yeah, I think the first piece is the impetus to actually pursue something other than an investment banking career. And that for me came from the fact that banking by nature can be very, very transactional, which is fun. Helping a company sell themselves or merge with another company or all the different things you do in banking, that's exciting to me, but not necessarily rewarding in the long term like building a business. And for me, what drove me to that conclusion is, well, I would take some of my disposable income as an investment banker and I would invest in startups. One of them in particular is called Pangea 3. They outsource legal services to India. By the way, I found this in the very typical way that you find, friends and family type rounds to invest in, which is my college roommates, work colleagues, neighbor started the company. So networked in that way. And in addition to that company actually having a good sale and a good outcome, that investment and others gave me a glimpse into the reality of the startup world. And the startup world in tech, it probably doesn't look like that show that was on HBO that much, although there are some similarities. But it's just very attractive to me and exciting, this idea of creating something from scratch and then building it into a large, viable, and durable business. So that was the impetus. Now to your question on what were the tactics. Uh, it was network first for sure. And the network relationship that ended up coming through for me on 6sense was a friend of mine had went through Y Combinator, right? One of these startup incubators, probably one of the top 2 or 3 in the world. And he had built his business, and I helped him sell it just because I was his friend and he knew I had some expertise in this. And during that process, I told him some of what I told you, and that I was looking for a role at an earlier stage company, not necessarily a from scratch startup. Maybe have something there. And unbeknownst to me, When he asked for my resume, he sent it to the entire Y Combinator listserv. Now, one of the things the Y Combinator folks do really well, in my experience, is when they send something to their internal listserv, like a recommendation that you should consider hiring somebody like Rob, is they only make those recommendations when they feel strongly about it and have real experience. This happened to be a longtime friend of mine who I helped sell his company. 6sense found me from that listserv email and actually reached out to me for the interview. Now, the other things I did was, well, every founder and every company I invested in, I called them all immediately and asked to be introduced to their investors, right? I think that transition from investment banking to startup, the most obvious path is through investor relationship, right? I mean, investors, they have hundreds of portfolio companies, and most of them, if they're growing, are in need of people really in any part of the organization.
Well, thank you for a great career journey for us. Very interesting, and some nice insights for us. Want to find out now about 6sense, this company that back in 2015 you joined. You told us it was small at the time, but first, let's just ask you. Tell us about 6sense. What does this company do, and what are its offerings today?
So I have two answers for that. The short one is from a financial perspective, which is 6sense is a growth equity backed enterprise software company with a recurring revenue business model. And I think in that one sentence, I encompass everything I knew about 6sense before I joined it, right? I could understand the recurring revenue business model, understand what enterprise software is, and I understand at the time it was a venture backed enterprise software company. Now, as for what we do, about 2 years before I joined, or 31 employees before I joined, depending on how you want to measure it, 6sense was founded to solve what I still think is the most important question for business to business or B2B sales and marketing teams, and really any business that sells to any other business, right? Anyone in B2B. And it's, who should you target to sell your product to next? And it seems like a very simple question, but if you think about a company that sells, let's say, construction equipment to other companies, there are a lot of companies out there that might be looking for a vendor to sell them construction equipment. But guess what? They're not looking every day to go buy a crane, right? And not every company that maybe looks like they could buy a crane wants to buy a crane. Maybe they're going to rent a crane. So what we do, and it doesn't matter the industry. So what we do at its core is help our customers find their next buyer. Now, that was the initial question that we solved. The product's expanded dramatically since then. Everything that we've done is aligned around the idea of find the right company to sell to, find that company at the right time, and then take all the next best steps to actually initiate a sales conversation, move that sales conversation along, and then close the deal. Now, what does that mean tactically? We will tell our customers who to contact, how to reach them. We'll even tell them what to say to them. By the way, that contact method might be an email. We'll even write the email that our customer sends to their product. This is part of the generative AI. I guess it's become sort of a craze recently. We've been selling a generative AI product for over a year and a half ago now, right? It's not actually new. It's just new in terms of how the world views it. But the power is there now, not just in the insight of who's going to buy, but also in the execution. Now, I'll give you a tangible example from the CFO perspective. One of the things we do, which is fairly straightforward, is we give our customers just a list of companies, right? It's the big, exhaustive list of all the companies in the world. One of the things I get asked about by investors or prospective investors, and one of the things I need to analyze just to understand 6sense's ability to be a durable business in the long term is what's our total addressable market, right? What's our TAM? Very common question folks need to answer. I use 6sense to answer it, and I start with that list of companies, and then I drill down, and there are a number of clicks, but ultimately I drill down into our ideal customer profile, which is for us, what companies can we sell our particular flavor of enterprise software to in the world? And actually, I narrow it down by geography as well. But when I say I narrow it down, I just tell our product, find me our ideal customer profile. And our product is sitting on top of all of our data and a bunch of third-party data. And this is another place where we apply AI and machine learning, and advanced data modeling. And it's basically the machine is telling me what our ideal customer profile actually is. Then I take it and I split it into two. I take the total ideal customer profile, and then I hit another button. I call it the TAM Now button, right? Who's actually in market to buy a product like ours or has a pain point that our product addresses. And that gives me another list. Then I take both those lists and do what all CFOs do and just apply a dollar amount to each of the companies on that list. And now I have our TAM. And by the way, this goes over great when I'm talking to particularly a potential new investor, or if you think about a potential IPO in our future, a public market investor that maybe can't invest now but wants to be educated prior to a potential IPO, they always ask about your TAM. And I can say, here's my TAM. And by the way, this isn't some wishy-washy number, right? This is how we developed it. Our product, what it's designed to do is identify your TAM and segment it and help you figure that out and target. For me to come now tell you our TAM, not only is it the easiest thing in the world, but this is probably the best TAM number you've ever heard in your 5 years or 40 years as an investor.
So interesting to turn back the clock to 2015, what you were just sharing with us, and particularly as you explained, you were incorporating generative AI before most of us fully digested what exactly this type of AI technology was capable of. Today, I would imagine there are a lot of educated consumers now who sort of get what you're up to a little quicker. How would you characterize sort of that? Suddenly we've caught up to where you folks may have been.
Yeah, I would say for starters, you hit the nail on the head. It's been a journey, right? And I think there's some similarities in the journey for any startup that develops into a pre-IPO company. I think that journey starts to look a little bit different when that company is in technology. And then, yes, it looks very different when there's something like AI at the core. So 15 years ago, I couldn't have said most of what I just said in my description. Even the educated prospects or buyers would have been either lost, or if not lost, maybe not necessarily believe in the promise of what AI can offer in terms of insights, analytics, and efficiency improvements. So I'll tell you how we used to describe it. The first thing we would do is explain how the internet has made a B2B sales and marketer's job tougher. So think about it this way. If you're selling, I'll use a different example than equipment. Let's use routers. If you're selling routers, by 2015, you might have been selling routers for 20 years. And it was a relatively straightforward sale. If you're a router company, you needed to call the chief information officer or the head of IT at a prospect. You would invite them to a steak dinner and maybe a baseball game, maybe invite them to the Masters, or her for that matter. And you would get the meeting and you'd have a nice chat, and that person was happy to engage with you and let you educate them on routers. People no longer buy routers that way. In fact, people no longer buy routers, period. It's a buying committee. If a company is going to go purchase routers, they might have 20 people involved in that purchase. Those 20 people are doing their research on the internet. They're doing it on various websites where there are reviews of routers. They are reading trade publications. But the last thing a buyer of a router wants to do is actually talk to a vendor of routers. In fact, their decision's probably made before they ever talk to a vendor. So now think about that from the vendor's perspective. They don't know how to get in touch with their potential buyers. They don't even know who the buyers are anymore because there are 20 of them. And they have no idea if that buyer is sort of in market to buy routers. So when we describe that pain point, everyone we would talk to in B2B sales and marketing would say, I get that. Then the next part would be, remember how we agreed that your buyer's doing all their research on the internet? What 6sense will do for you is we will locate those potential buyers when they're on the internet doing research. In fact, that's still one of our biggest competitive moats. If there is a person out there researching routers, 6sense is going to find what company they work for and tell our customer, this company is researching routers. That would be an input. That data set, I mean, this is billions and billions of interactions. That data set would be an input to our modeling, one of many inputs. But we didn't even necessarily need to talk about the modeling piece or the AI piece. It's just an understanding that we have that signal.
Great insight there for us. You mentioned the company at one time was venture backed. Could you maybe provide us with a sort of an abbreviated history of the company's capital structure?
Yes. So the company was founded essentially by a business consultant focused on B2B marketers and helping them generate demand, and a group of highly technical big data analytics engineers who had gone through Y Combinator, and they got together to solve this problem that I mentioned. And once they got together, they went and looked for their seed money. And eventually, after who knows how many, actually, I know exactly how many different VC funds they were rejected by. It was 60 plus. They found a venture fund that was willing to commit a few $1,000,000 of capital to support this fledgling idea. And then the company nearly immediately got traction, actually with pre-existing customers of the business consultant, which led to another round of funding, which allowed more traction, which led to, I would say, the most important early stage round, which was a $20 million raise. It was led by Bain Capital Ventures. But at that point, it was, we have a software product. We have a customer base. We've demonstrated that our customer base is successful with our product, right? The venture investors would call that product market fit. And then at that point, it was fairly easy or straightforward, I should say, to raise the money. By the way, right after they raised that money is when they went out looking for an internal finance and accounting person. So I like to say that $20 million raise was used to hire me. Since then, the company's grown from being called millions of dollars of revenue to tens of millions, to hundreds of millions. And then the fundraising experience looks different. That's what I mean by going from venture investor, who's very much willing to see an idea and see initial traction and make an investment in relatively small dollar amounts, to that growth equity investor where they want to see more customer proof points. They want to see a history of, for our recurring revenue business model, they want to see a history of renewals and retention and selling more product to that customer. And they want to see 50 customers that can demonstrate real hard ROI, right? More pipeline generated, more deals won in percentage term, larger deal values. And then when we did that, and I got to be here for all those, well, then you get something like our last round where it was a $200 million check. And we certainly didn't need to go to 60 different investors to get it.
Well, that's helpful. Thank you. Want to talk to you about your lines of sight into the business today as the finance leader. And we would imagine that, as you said, it sounds like a SaaS offering, all the usual unit economic metrics that you're watching closely. But what would you have to add to that? I mean, and again, it's There's a lot of content out there with SaaS CFOs discussing their B2B unit economic metrics, but I'm wondering how you might look at the world a little differently. Anything you can share about your business metrics and what you keep top of mind and what maybe you pay a little closer attention to than most?
Sure. And maybe it's not that I pay closer attention, but take a slightly different view on it, right? So the some of the top metrics would be gross margin, right? For a SaaS business, you want 80% plus gross margins. Then there's various takes on sales efficiency, and I'll come back to that. And then, of course, there's probably the top two pieces, which are just your overall revenue and the growth that goes with it. ARR, annual recurring revenue, being the metric for SaaS companies. And then there's metrics around your retention of customers, either gross retention or net retention, which would then account for how much more you sell to your pre-existing customers. And it's sales efficiency where I think I spend the most time. And it's not so much on the metrics as much as how much do we believe in our forecast for the improvement of sales efficiency, and how do we get there? So if you think about the annual planning for the budget process for a company like ours, we have sales reps in the field. They're very highly paid. They're very important to our business, not just in selling the product, but setting a new customer up for success. And the way I think most companies try to figure out how to forecast what's going to go on with their field sales team is they build a sales capacity model. And simply put, you have a number of sales reps, you have their quota that they're going to carry, right? They have to sell, let's say, $1 million a year. And then you have what percentage of their quota do you think they're going to attain? And that's what ultimately drives efficiency. If you have a sales rep making $250,000 a year and they attain 30% of their quota, and their quota is $1 million, that sales rep is not great for the company. If they're hitting 120% of quota, that's great for the company. Now, I think the problem folks get into with this sales capacity model is just that. It's a model. You go plug in more sales reps, you're going to get more revenue. You increase that assumption on quota attainment, you're going to have more efficient revenue generation. The issue is, in reality, you can't just go hire more sales reps willy-nilly, or you can't just sort of bump up attainment and say, yeah, we'll fix that later. So where I spend a lot of my time is trying to understand, what are we doing to increase attainment? Has it been successful? Can we go and look at the data to say, oh, here's what our highest attaining reps are doing that works. Here are our lowest attaining reps. Can we identify why they're not working out as well? And by the way, if you can't identify why the good reps do good and the bad reps do bad, you cannot forecast that you're going to become more efficient in sales. In fact, I would argue you need to forecast that you're going to become less efficient, and figuring out those drivers and that answer, that takes a lot of time, and you can't solve it in a spreadsheet. So I would say that's where I probably spend most of my time, and maybe a little bit different. And then there's one other element here that I think is crucial, but I don't think is unique to me, is you run all the metrics and do all the budgeting and the modeling and the forecasting, but then you need to do the sanity check. And I think the only nearly perfect, or I would say the best option for a sanity check, is talking to customers and prospects for that matter, right? Oftentimes, in the CFO role in particular, and in finance and accounting in general, you can become somewhat insular to very insular. And to break that trend, you need to understand the reason why you're in business in the first place, which is how your customers use your product, how they're getting value out of it, where their problems are, where things are going great, why they might buy more, why they might churn, why they might renew, and really understand their business pain points and how we're addressing them.
Now, again, understanding that you really built the finance function, you took over from a fractional CFO, you made some key hires clearly over the years, and you architected how it operates today. And your market offerings are AI driven, and you kind of would have to have your own AI vision as a CFO. How is the finance function going to be impacted by AI from your point of view?
So I would start by talking about two places where AI has made significant inroads and has actually been helpful around efficiency, first and foremost, and maybe a little bit on outcomes. But that is on forecasting and then vendor and expense management. On the forecasting piece, the if you think about how a forecast is made, you look at historical data, you look at forward looking, usually something that looks like pipeline data or economic data, but there are various different data sets, and you bring it in, and then a human with their native intelligence, their skill set, their pattern recognition tries to take all those data sets, and they can be very large, and form an opinion on the forecast for the company that is nearly perfect. And if you think about in the public context, that forecast has to be nearly perfect, right? In the software market, it's the beat and raise mentality, meaning you need to beat your forecast by about, 10% every time, which means you need to be able to forecast internally perfectly and then give a number to the street that's haircut by 9 to 10%. That forecasting piece is incredibly difficult and I think still inefficient, although there are tools out there that have allowed it to be more efficient. Principally, and they leverage AI principally on the ingestion of data, but also on the development of the actual forecast. I see that as a long term trend. I don't think it'll happen overnight, but 10 years from now, I think we'll be more reliant on AI to determine our forecast than we are on the vendor and expense management piece. You've seen a little bit of AI creating efficiencies. And I'll give you a boring but very important example for somebody in my role, and that is hotel bills. When we get a hotel bill, one, all of our employees, when they get a hotel bill, they need to actually take a picture of it and submit it to our expense management platform. But one of the things that we're looking for is how much did they spend on lodging and how much did they spend at the lobby bar, presumably not drinking, but getting a burger or a salad for lunch. The IRS in the US looks at those two expenses differently. So we have to track them differently. So we have one hotel bill with two different expense types, lodging and food and beverage. Uh, it used to be somebody would have to open that bill, type it in, click save and submit, and then we go through a bunch of approvers and whatnot. Now, through AI and machine learning, at least in our system, that bill gets submitted. Somehow a machine, I don't fully understand how they do it, but that machine reads the bill and it splits up the expense for us. It seems like a small thing, but we're a 1,200 person company, and any given month, a third of them are traveling. That's a lot of hotel bills. We probably have three less people on the payroll because of that one functionality driven by AI than we would have had in the same situation 20 years ago.
Wow, great examples for us. Thank you for those. We are up to our finance strategic moment question, where we ask you just to look back in time and share with us a moment of insight that you've had given your unique lines of sight into the organization. What comes to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
So there are a number of things, but I'll give you an example that was a huge aha moment for me, and I think positively influenced the direction of our entire company over the last 6 years and hopefully for the next 60. And we started out selling to very large enterprises. Four of our five first customers were Fortune 1000. We could have continued on that track and been a $1 billion revenue company. There was plenty of TAM there. But as I got to understand our market, and as I got more to the customer side, as opposed to the narrowly defined finance side, I tried to look at it from a different perspective and said, our Fortune 1000 customers, well, one, they love us, although that's a tough term, right? You want your customers to love you. More importantly, you want your customers to do better because they bought your product. And our customers were doing exceptionally well, much better because they had our product. And then I look at it and say, what makes a successful customer? Right? I don't say, what do we need to get to $1 billion in revenue? What TAM do we need? I say, what do we need to have a successful customer? And what it came down to, and this is a year-long journey, it's like what they say about bankruptcy. You go bankrupt very slowly, then all at once. This aha moment, it went very slowly and then all at once. And the all at once was every single B2B company can massively improve their efficiency by using our product. Right. So I'm not thinking about our financials. This is why it's a financial moment. I'm thinking about their financials. Right. Every single one of them can have a great financial outcome for this. So now let's reverse engineer from there and say, what do we want to be as a company? And that said to me, well, don't just focus on the Fortune 1000, even though you can accomplish your goals that way, you being 6sense as a company. Focus on every B2B company. And what do we have to do to be able to provide this value to every B2B company in the world? And that became actually was probably my strongest held opinion at the time. Try not to form opinions quickly. And if I have an opinion, I got to make sure that I can argue the other side better than the other side can, because this was a big change and it would require a multi-year product journey. Right? It means the outlook for our business and the complexion of our business would be on a very new trajectory. But I don't see how you don't want to put your product in the hands of every company that's going to be successful with that. And I think that would apply as a aha moment to any business.
From episode 821, this is 1 Minute with CFO Michael Sumroll of Parker Wellbore.
Look, I mean, we're looking across the geographies, we're looking across our primary service offerings, we're trying to understand the basic profitability of those businesses. We're trying to look at them across those locations to see why are we better in one versus another. Why is the cost structure so much different here than it is over there? Why are we getting certain pricing in this market but not in this other market? And then bringing in the external factors. For us, a huge driver is rig count, activity driver, well count as well to a certain degree. And so we're looking at those external drivers and trying to understand the trend, the macro trend that's in play.
We're going to jump to what we refer to as our mentoring round. And forgive me, we're running a little long. I want to return to that first year after you stepped into the CFO role. After that round of interviews, you got the job. When you think back, and again, this is sort of where we try to get advice for new CFOs, there must have been something you wish someone had told you. If you can think back to that first 90 days after having gotten the position, I wish someone had told me this. And anything come to mind when you think back?
The three things. First and foremost, feedback is a gift. Coming from investment banking, where it's sometimes a fight every day, into a corporate environment, I personally I could get prickly when there was feedback. My first instinct, and maybe this is human instinct, is somebody gives you feedback that disagrees with your opinion, is to try to argue against it. You take the mindset that feedback is a gift, well, then you actually listen and try to learn from that feedback instead of arguing it right out of the gate. Now, you might end up arguing it. The feedback might not necessarily be correct, but it leads to the second thing I wish somebody told me, which is there are differences between data points and examples. It is dangerous to make decisions based on examples. It is important to make decisions based on data points. By the way, I consider feedback somewhat of an example. Rob, I thought you sounded angry on this call, right? Okay, maybe I need to watch, be more cognizant of how I come across on calls. But examples are dangerous when you're making decisions because they're there to support sort of a subjective opinion, right? When you want to make a decision, you need to focus on objective fact and be rigorous in gathering data points. Early in my career, I was very susceptible to these very subjective arguments that were supported by examples. XYZ customer had this problem. That means we need to build Y. And I would say, oh, this is our customer. We want to serve our customer well. You're right. We absolutely have to do it. I wish somebody had said, okay, Rob, that's a data point. Now go check 50 other customers and see if there's the same problem. So that differentiation between examples and data points. And then finally, I wish that somebody had told me, like my first day on the job, sure, Rob, go figure out how QuickBooks is working for your company and meet some folks and some of the operational things, but get it onto customer calls as soon as humanly possible. It took me a year before I was on my first meaningful customer call, right? So that means I essentially spent that entire first year focused on what you had mentioned and what I had mentioned, which is getting our financial and accounting ship sort of together and more higher functioning and implementing systems and whatnot. But that was a year lost of gathering intel from the customer side of the business.
Great 1, 2, 3 for us. Thank you for that. Rob, we're going to ask you now, and we always do this, to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side for us, whether you have a personal habit or part of a daily routine, something you're known for, something that maybe sets you apart. Anything come to mind when we ask for a personal habit or part of a routine that you have, something that it might be something a family member might point at? Don't know.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of habits, for starters, I read somewhere, I have no idea if this is true, but I read that 80% of everything you do every day is habitual. So my focus on forming good habits, or at least getting away from bad habits, is one of my top priorities. And I mention that because that's the number one habit I try to foster in myself, and it's ruthless prioritization. And I come at it from an economic perspective. If you think of economics as being the study of how to deploy or allocate resources in an environment where resources are scarce or finite, you need to prioritize where those resources go. For me, that resource is my time. And I try to make sure that I prioritize it as well as humanly possible. But I'll give you an example. Let's say I have 5 things to do in the next hour, and I know I have enough time to do all 5 of them. I don't just pick whichever one is first on the list and go after that. Even then, I practice the prioritization. So I look at all 5, I say, which one's the top of the list here? And I do that one first. And then what's second most important, and so on and so on. And then you asked if that comes through in the rest of my work life or my personal life, or if I'm known for it. No doubt, in my personal and my professional life, sometimes it manifests itself in funny ways in my personal life when I'm talking with my 10-year-old, but in my professional life, it can manifest itself on really any given conversation. Take, for example, my revenue leader wants to go hire 2 people. The first question is, which hire is more important? You'd be surprised. The first time I ask that question to a new person that I hire, it takes them a little while to figure it out. Sometimes they need to come back to me. Everybody who's worked for me for at least, I don't know, call it 6 months, They already know that answer. The other question I ask on almost every one-on-one I have is, what's your priority for the next week? And by the way, the first time I get that answer, it's not one priority, it's 5, almost without exception. And then I tell them the same thing every time. I say, if you have 5 priorities, you have no priorities. I want you to think, what is your number one priority for the next week? And one of the reasons why I do this goes towards a much broader topic, which you haven't touched on, which is leadership. And I think one of the key pieces of leadership is teaching the people on your team, or helping them or coaching them to also become leaders. And I don't think you can be an effective leader without the ability to effectively prioritize.
Nice, great. Wanted to ask if you have a book that you'd recommend. Doesn't have to be a business book. It might have been a book that just influenced your thinking. It might have been something you escape with. Anything for a book selection?
So there's a collection of works by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. It's long. Some of these, it's like little snippets. Some of them seem outdated. One quote, for example, is, if a pickle is too sour, don't eat it. But if you think about it, that's actually great advice. And the reason why I say that is, one, it's even though it's a little bit of a dense read, there are lots of great business sort of ideas in there that come in very short and easily packaged and repeatable one-line snippets. And I feel like if you're going to read anything, especially from a business perspective, and think you're going to gain from it, if you can't remember what you read 6 months later, you have, I don't want to say wasted your time, maybe it passed the time well for you, but it's a waste if you can't recall it and then apply it 5 years later. And this particular book and some of the lines, I think you can apply them 5 years later. Another example would be, I will never argue objective truth. If I have an opinion and you show me facts counter to that opinion, I will immediately change it.
Nice. Great. Thank you for that. You were talking about priorities. This is where we ask you, it's our final question, for your 12-month priorities as a CFO. What would those be?
For me, it's building the team. So what I've done over the last several years, but that's accelerated, is for the most part, I've hired the finance and accounting team. The right people are here, I think. Building a team and hiring a team are two very different things. Now, you have to hire them first. And what building a team means to me is, one, getting them all working together. Get the systems and processes and policies all in place that'll support our business. And then the last step in building that team is how we deliver the finance and accounting function to other stakeholders. And I'll give you 2 examples. It's timely and accurate reporting, critical function of finance and accounting, in a compliant way, and for us in a way that would be SEC compliant, even though we're not necessarily public. But it's also, and this is a little bit more amorphous, is delivering finance and accounting as a service function to internal and external stakeholders, right? And that's what building that team really means, because ultimately, you can talk about timely and accurate reporting. Ultimately, finance, in my estimation, accounting, in my estimation, is a service business. And your customers are, well, heck, it might be your end customers, but more often it's their internal or the board is your customer.
Rob Goldenberg, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader. Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at at CFOThoughtLeader.com, and of course our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.